My guest today is Jane Milburn, and we have had a wonderful conversation around clothing and how important it is for us to be aware of the clothing that we buy and the clothing that we wear. Jane, how can people find out more about you?
My website is textilebeat.com, and my book Slow Clothing is available in a lot of libraries. I mean, that's a really good place to find out whether they've got it, and they might get it in if they don't.
That's right, so ask them. Sunshine Coast Libraries particularly are fantastic. If you have a sewing group though, I have a copy that we can give you. So if you've got a sewing group and you would like to have this in your sewing group library, send me a message and I'll be sure to pass this on. I'm Robin Cook. This is Jane Milburn. This is Stories from the Red Couch. Stay right through to the end. I know you'll love it. Jane, you say that we eat every day and we dress every day. And we're so much more conscious of what we eat now. I guess it's time, as you say, it's time that we also became more conscious of what we wear.
Particularly for health. You know, it's really about our health, and that's why we've become conscious of food, as well as the environment, I guess, to a certain extent. But I think dressing and eating for health and well-being are the most important things that we can do. And the more we think and reflect on where our food comes from, where our clothing comes from, I think the more grounded and connected we are with those everyday activities.
So how could we make some better choices around dressing for health? I mean, it's not necessarily a concept that everybody would think of, is it?
No, because I guess the first thing is appearance, and that's important, but my background is in agricultural science, and so I'm interested in the fibres, what I'm wearing next to my skin, and I have found that I don't enjoy wearing anything other than natural fibres, and even there is one natural fibre that I don't enjoy wearing, and that's Angora. I find that a bit scratchy, but everything else is fabulous. It's only really recently that we've started to refocus on the fibres themselves, and the synthetic fibres, they don't allow our skin to breathe as much, therefore they harbour bacteria.
Of course.
We get hotter in our climate in Queensland, and when we wash them, they are actually shedding microplastic particles into the ecosystem. So this information wasn't really known until fairly recently. So, you know, I guess that's one thing. Also, I think the way we feel is impacted by what we're wearing, and sometimes we don't necessarily understand that, but I'm really into comfort. I don't wear high heels and things like that. So I think as time goes on, and certainly as you get older and wiser, you realise that you know, focusing on your health and being comfortable in your own skin and what you're wearing is actually
so much more important, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the ultimate.
Yeah, and that's the thing about fashion, isn't it? Because if you're not talking about fashion, you're talking about clothing, and I've never been a follower of fashion because, one, I don't like to be dictated to by someone else as to what I should be wearing. How do you feel about the difference between fashion and clothing?
Well, this is how I arrived at what I'm doing, actually. It's why I called my book Slow Clothing, because I don't relate to the fashion narrative, and I wasn't interested. Like, whenever you read anything, until fairly recently, whenever you read anything about fashion, it was about the designers and the personalities and the drama and the excitement and the art of it all, which is great over there, but it's not for every day. And I wasn't having any connection with that story at all. And I guess because of my background in agriculture, followed the slow food movement. I worked for farm groups where we were talking about where our food comes from. And to me, when I looked at it, I thought the clothing story sits beside the food story. So what is the clothing story? And that's what I started exploring. And I have always made a lot of my own clothes. I have also op-shopped and adapted things. Even when I was a uni student, I adapted some of my great aunt's dresses in a more conservative way to what I do now.
Yes.
Like I've got into radical chopping up now, but back then I was just
nipping and tucking.
Yeah, that's right. So it's to me it's not something new that I've done, but I kind of realised, well, I've got a story to tell around that. There is another story that is not necessarily a fashion story. It's about ordinary people, what ordinary people want to wear, and you know, developing our indie, I call it indie style, so that we're independent and we're individual, and we're really just dressing to please ourselves. And I guess when you're a bit younger, you kind of feel like you've got to conform and fit in a bit.
Yes.
Not every young person feels that way, but often there's kind of that, you know, almost entrapment by industry and being intimidated into thinking you've got to look a certain way. But, you know, I think as long as, I mean, personally, as long as you're modest, like, I don't think it matters what you wear.
How easy is it to... I don't sew. I'm not a sewer, and that's to my great regret, to be honest. And my skills are more in growing food and cooking food. But I would love to sew, and I'd love to be able to, you know, pull something interesting together, like what we're wearing today. I've just lobbed this out of Jane's wardrobe. And it's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, they're great because they're multi-fit, like nice and easy and comfortable. And both of them are made from silk garments that I salvaged from the op shop and have cut up and re-stitched. It's a very simple pattern when you understand how it's dissected. And I think, just to your point about sewing, I'm pretty much self-taught on my sewing. So as one of my friends said, if you can follow a recipe to cook a dish, you can follow a pattern to make a simple garment.
Yes.
It's actually about just a very simple sewing machine which has straight stitch and zigzag. That's really all you need. And it is just starting simply, starting with a really easy pattern. I think sometimes we get really ambitious.
I'm totally
I'm not
ambitious.
sure about what your experience is,
I'm ambitious.
but you know, wanting to go the whole hog, whereas really just a simple rectangle with some straps over it. And I've started making a few just with hand stitching.
Okay.
I didn't bring one with me here, but you know, really just a rectangle in some lovely fabric, just hand stitching down the side and cutting a space for the neck and turning it over and doing blanket stitch around there. You've got a dress. And I think particularly on the hot days, we need sort of loose, comfortable garments that breathe. Yes, but a shift is a rectangle when you're not unduly worried about it. And even if you start just making things to wear around the house, you gradually get more confident and capable. And I think sewing is a life skill, just like cooking is.
That's right.
Yet we've got to a situation now where we mainly outsource all our garments, all our needs. We outsource to the experts or you know, the designers or the professionals. And look, I mean, I don't make absolutely all of my own clothes. I've got a wool suit that was a Veronica Main suit. I would never attempt to make something like that. So I just think there's a place to slip something in, and starting with a needle and thread and mending, hand stitching, that's entry level, and that's a great place to start. And there's such a thing now, as we call it, visible mending, where, you know, you're showing what you're wearing. And I think in this time of a changing climate, everything's open for discussion and review about how we use resources and how we can make a difference through our everyday choices.
I've seen a few little sewing groups pop up. We've got one here in Palmwoods, and there's a couple of others on the coast. Are you seeing that on a larger scale across the country?
Well, I feel so, but it's really interesting when you step outside of your known little area that suddenly you realise, oh, there's a lot of other people out there.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say that, you know, there's a major shift on, and I really don't think it will be for everyone, because it actually does take a little bit of time, and you've got to be...
And it's not cheaper necessarily.
Oh, it's definitely not cheaper.
No, it's not about
you wouldn't
cheapness.
do it for cheapness. No, you'd actually do it to be expensive, really, you know, to be exclusive.
Yes.
And I feel this, you have a connection with your clothes when you've put your own energy in it.
Yep.
And one of the quotes in my book is that until you make something with your own hands, you don't appreciate or value the resources, the energy and the skill that go into the clothes you buy.
Yeah.
So to me, that's partly why you'd want to, you know, be able to at least understand the process and do some simple things. You know, to not even be able to take up your hem. I mean, and this was one of my experiences that led me to be doing what I'm doing. My daughter was at a, you know, like a posh school, and I went to the uniform shop to get her something new for her, you know, the requirements. And a young woman who was probably a senior girl came in there and said to the volunteers, oh, can you take up my hem, because there's only Dad and I at home, and we don't know how to do it. And I thought, you know, an educational institution of such a high calibre, you know, and you haven't got the ability or the, you know, the simple, so it's, you know, threading a needle, putting a knot in one end and going like that.
Yeah.
It is not complicated.
It's not complicated.
But, you know, somehow, you know, that's missing.
Yeah.
So these are simple things that I just feel we need to know about. And really that's kind of the premise that I'm going on here.
You're doing some things with kids now, aren't you? You're running some workshops?
A little bit, but my whole ethos is I've built what I'm doing from an organic perspective. I go where I'm invited, and sometimes I am invited to do workshops with children. I'm looking forward to doing one. I'm developing a little project that enables them to do, you know, use salvage materials and learn about stitching and sewing on a button. But, you know, it's really probably we need a broader across society thing. Like, I'm influencing change.
Yes.
And I'm certainly happy I travel wherever I'm invited to go.
Yes.
But I think it's more than, you know, we need a whole battalion of teachers. And I think it's the grandmas, the older generation that remember the common sense approach where we did this, you know, before the fast fashion consumerist era. These are the teachers that just need to pass on those skills.
My grandmother would turn collars and cuffs and sheets.
Yes. Yes, well, that was very much of that era when we were resource scarce, whereas now we've got so many resources coming out of our ears, and they're extremely affordable, and you have to look at why are they.
Yes.
And it's because we're not playing the true value. You know, there's exploitation of the environment and of people outside our consumerist society that is enabling us to have a throwaway culture. I don't think we'll get to the turn back the collar stage, although I do know of people who've still done, you know, who are doing that now. And when you do it, it actually makes you feel good.
Yes.
And I think that's a bit of a message. Like, there's been a real change in the last couple of years, not just a move to more hands-on sewing, but to actually being more connected with what you're wearing and being more aware of what's going on with our resources.
You have been named as a Churchill Fellow.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. It really is exciting. It really is exciting. And when I had the interview, one of the questions was, well, why do you want a Churchill Fellowship? And I said, well, the imprimatur of the Churchill Fellowship, which is the sort of stamp or the recognition of a fellowship, will elevate the work that I've been doing.
Yes.
Because basically I just stepped into this from my previous career because I felt somebody needed to say something, you know, and I stepped out and said, well, I wear second-hand clothes and I sew. And my husband said to me at the time, why are you throwing away your career? Because, you know, I sort of had worked professionally, and it was actually, you know, I said, well, I'm actually reinvesting, starting from, all I could do was start where I was, use what I have, do what I can, to create a difference in the world. And that's the great thing about the Churchill as well, in addition to the fact that it will enable me to travel overseas and meet other people who are changing practices and get some new information and bring it back and share it with the Australian community.
That's fantastic. So when will you start that?
Well, you can travel any time through next year, but I will probably go in April, May. I'm still researching exactly who I'm going to meet with, and I'll be travelling to Japan, the US, the UK, the Netherlands and Germany. And I want to meet people, practitioners like myself, but also groups and governments, just to find out what's happening. My specific topic, you have to put in a really specific project, and it's actually to investigate ways that hands-on upcycling can reduce textile waste and enhance well-being. So in simple terms, what that means is entry-level upcycling is mending, so how mending practices might stop us throwing away so much stuff and actually make us feel good at the same time.
That's fantastic.
I think linking all of that together. So for me, between now and when I go, I need to be conceptualising the kind of output that I want to have from this, and how it can add and enhance what I've been doing to date, just through my own initiative.
And what are you doing on the Sunshine Coast currently?
Oh, well, I was invited up. I did the Australian Rural Leadership Program back in 2009-10. Oh, it's a 60-day professional personal development program based on the leadership that you've done and the leadership you will do. And really, this is the journey that I'm on. So I was actually invited to speak to a small group that was in Maroochydore. They have come from various parts of Australia to be there, and so I was just talking about my leadership journey, that particular thing. But I've also been involved with the fabric program, so I've been up here a couple of times recently. Sunshine Coast Council's doing a wonderful job there. It's a 3-year program, so there's still another year for which to be involved in, and you know, that shares all levels of engagement, and you don't have to be particularly creative. I have to say that my education was in science, ag science is my degree, so I did maths, so I did the full, it's called the Suicide Six now, you know, chemistry, physics, maths, biology, you know, it wasn't, I didn't have any creativity much up until when I had children and I started playing with fabric paints with them. And this has been the start of my personal creative journey. And then I've just married all of that with my other work. So I've brought together everything that I am and feel that I'm applying it through Textile Beat, which is sort of mainly just, I call it a social enterprise, small business based on social enterprise principles. But it's mainly because it's purpose driven rather than profit. You know, like I, you know, somehow end up not earning too much money, but I'm having a great time, and I know I feel I'm making a difference.
And meeting people and helping to bring about change for others.
And that's really, the reward is there.
So you've got a manifesto here, haven't you?
Yes.
I love that. Slow clothing. So we're talking slow clothing.
And you know, can I tell you how that came about?
Please do.
In 2014, after I decided, well, I'm doing this, you know, leadership initiative, and I thought, because I'd run campaigns in the past for various farm groups and things, I I thought I need a campaign of my own making, and I called it Sew It Again. And every day I was blogging and, you know, mending or changing a garment and writing about it and writing about what I'd read and all this sort of stuff. And really, you know, as time went on, I realised there's not many people sewing anymore. I actually had not quite twigged to that extent that sewing was so off the agenda. So I realised at the end of that year, and I wrote the manifesto in 2015, so that really to talk beyond the making and the salvaging and adapting, which I was doing. The bottom 5 actions apply to that, whereas the top 5 actions are just if you want to continue on. So it's thinking. Everyone should be thinking more for a start, and then buying natural, quality, locally made things, and just a few. So they're the actions you can take without really changing very much at all. And certainly you don't need to get hands-on to do that. You just have to perhaps invest a little more time and be more conscious in your shopping.
Yes.
I never buy anything on sale really, because that's the stuff that people are wanting to get rid of that hasn't, you know. So they're just the actions ordinarily, and then when you get more hands-on, you care, make, revive, adapt and salvage.
That's fantastic. Jane, how can people find more about your work, but also to be able to buy this magnificent book? It's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And has so much fabulous information with handy tips, on how to do something. That's terrific.
Because I realised that, you know, it's actually, we need to go back to basics. My website is textilebeat.com. My book, I always say, ask your local library so you can borrow it if you like.
Wonderful.
That's the start, and then you can have a look. If you feel you want to purchase it, it is available internationally through the, you know, the various online shops, but I sell it through my website as well.
Okay, and maybe that's something that you, if you wanted to start a sewing group.
Yes, having one in the
you could have one in your sewing library, sewing group library would be fantastic.
And I've also made a little. It's called The Process of Mending, so it's just a little, they call them zines now, it's like a little booklet, and so that's a more affordable way, if, you know, just if you want the hand stitching component of the work as well.
Fabulous. All right, go to your local library, ask for Slow Clothing. My guest today has been Jane Milburn. I'm still Robin Cook, I've been that all day. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you for listening.